Good morning, everybody. There are few marriages that have been as dramatic as those of King Henry VIII of England, who had 6 wives. And it was on this date in 1536, May 19, that his second wife, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded in a chapel in the Tower of London. When we think of Ferdinand and Isabella, we often think of them sending out Columbus. But they are linked to our story because their daughter Catherine was Henry VIII's first wife. So if you look at this chart of the House of Tudor, you'll notice on the far left Arthur Tudor. He had married Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. But Arthur died, so Catherine married Arthur's brother, Henry VIII. But one of the issues that this marriage brought up was the church had prohibited marriages like this. This is a reminder of canon law, that's church law. So Henry needed to get permission from the Pope to marry Catherine of Aragon, which the Pope granted. So later, when Henry wanted to annul that same marriage to Catherine, the Pope said, "No way. I gave you special permission to marry her. I'm not going to now give you permission to annul the marriage." And this really upset Henry VIII. Another player in this story is Charles V, in the middle of this chart, the Holy Roman Emperor. If you look in the upper left of the chart, you'll notice in the red box, Joanna. That's Charles V's mom, and she's the sister of Catherine, Henry's wife. So in Charles' eyes, if that annulment would happen, that would embarrass a family member. Now this map reminds us how much territory Charles V controlled, anything that's tan or yellow. And in some of his lands, the Protestant Reformation was getting started, so he was really nervous about the Reformation. And here he is with his army in Rome. He was keeping an eye on the Pope. In fact, the Pope was his prisoner. So there's no way the Pope's going to cooperate with Henry VIII. So Henry VIII turned to Parliament. And Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, which made Henry VIII the supreme head over the Church of England. And now he could do what he wanted, which was annul the marriage to Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn, which he did. But after a while, he got tired of Anne. They weren't able to have a son, and he had her imprisoned here in the Tower of London. They made up some charges of adultery and treason, and it was on this date that Anne Boleyn was executed, pictured here. No foreigners were allowed at the execution because Henry didn't want the details to leak out to Europe, but people who were there did take notes, and they noticed how royal, how regal, how calm Anne acted as she went to her death. And as you might recall, she and Henry had one child, a girl, Elizabeth I, arguably the greatest queen in English history. And one event that happened on Elizabeth's watch was the invasion of the Spanish Armada, because the Spanish never acknowledged the annulment with Catherine. They never acknowledged Anne Boleyn as queen, and they certainly never acknowledged Elizabeth as a rightful queen. So that's part of that story. This is the Tower of London complex today. Some of you have been to see the Tower Jewels, and it's in this complex Anne Boleyn was executed. Now there's a memorial in the Tower of London to the victims of the tower. This is not only for Anne Boleyn, it's for others who were executed. But there is a little memorial for Anne in the chapel where she was killed and buried. Years later, there was some remodeling done, and they found a skeleton that they're pretty sure was Anne Boleyn's body. So if you go there sometime, you can be pretty sure that Anne is actually there where the memorial is. When I was in high school, this was a really popular movie, Anne of a Thousand Days, because she was queen for about 3 years. And there have been other movie versions too. Some of you know this recent TV series called Wolf Hall about Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn and the intrigues at the court. So there have been lots of kings and queens in England, and I think we'd agree that the story of Henry VIII and his 6 wives is one of the most dramatic.